Hi, friends. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 372 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. Before we dive into today's conversation, I'd love your help in reaching a very important goal for Season 9. It has always been my hope for this podcast to feature the school librarians from all 50 states. As of this taping, I have 12 remaining states: Arizona, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, North Dakota, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. If you know of a school librarian from one of these states who might be interested in recording an episode, please don't hesitate to encourage them to tune in to a podcast episode and then email me at schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Friends, this podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, starting my 20th year, I am committed to providing a podcast which addresses the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast does something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can find me on Facebook, on Threads, and Instagram. You can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, censorship's impact on school librarians and libraries, and my conversation with Dr. Misty Schattle. Dr. Schattle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
Friends, we are in for a treat. I am always incredibly opportunistic when somebody dedicates, a semester or two to gathering data and insight, and they put it together in this amazing write-up and share it with me. And we're going to talk about this for an hour. Dr. Schattle, would you introduce yourself, tell us about your work, and what do you do in the field of librarianship?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Misty Schattle. I was a school librarian for 17 years. I spent 20 years in K-12 altogether. First, I was a teacher. I taught middle school social studies, and then I moved into the school library, and I was a high school librarian for 11 years, and then I got budget cut down to elementary, where I spent 2 years, and I learned I have a lot of respect for you elementary people, because that is not my bag. So I went back to the high school library, was there for about another 4 years, and then I had the opportunity to move into academia, and now I'm at Sam Houston State University. I'm a research and instruction librarian where I liaise to the College of Education. So for me, it was a perfect fit. And one of the things that I like to say I love most about my job is I actually still manage a children's and young adult collection. So I'm like that selector, and I'm the one, so it's exciting because I still get to keep my hand in that. And, that literature that I loved so much, I still get a hold on it. And also, we have a school library certification program at our campus. So I'm able to work with them. I liaise to their department. And that's just been a lot of fun, working with school librarians or soon to be school librarians from the other side. So I've enjoyed that.
Well, and with all the experience that you have, it sounds like you aren't lacking for experience to impart on your students. And, you have an appreciation having seen this from several vantage points. I did 14 years of elementary, and I have the greatest respect for anyone who revels in that age group. I will say I leapfrog over middle school. I've never done middle school. But I'm going into year 6 of high school, and that's fine. I do not envy all the work that you are doing at the collegiate level. I would be way out of my comfort zone working with grown adults and grading. I don't know. The idea of grading people's writing just it puts fear in my heart. So, you recently published an article, and And you and I actually met on July 9th. I have that date emblazoned on my calendar because I was in Austin and we got to meet in person. So, so tell me about this article that you published, because also, something that does not appeal to me in the slightest, but you did all this work and got your work published, and we're going to talk about it today.
Okay, so I would love to say that I was just this amazing researcher and the idea just came to me and I ran with it. But I was actually a doctoral student and I had this idea in my head because I was doing all this research, looking into everything that's out there. And I found that there was a major gap in the literature. I could find all this kind of research on the mental health of teachers. I could even find research on the mental health of administrators, but I could find nothing on school librarians, not a single article. There was nothing out there. So I was I went to my chair, to my professor. Actually, I ended up having a chair change, but I went to the first one and I was like, this is what I want to do. He was like, yeah, you can't do that. There's no way you can't do that. You cannot look at the mental health of school librarians. That won't work. You can't do it. And I was totally dejected, right? I was but this is what, this is the only thing that I've wanted to do for the last 2.5 years, right? This is all I wanted to research. And so then I ended up having a chair change, which was a really good thing for me. And this new professor was like, I think you can do it, but we need to look at it from a different lens. Yeah, the research isn't there, so you're not really going to be able to talk about how it works for school librarians, at least in the beginning. He was like, but you got to look at the role, and then you can also talk about the mental health of educators in general, and then we can link the two together and we can go from there. And so I was like, well, okay, so I think we can make this work. So I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about the role. I was currently, at that time, I was an actual school librarian. Lots of my friends that were in a different school district the previous year had gone through major censorship challenges, and I was okay, thinking to myself, well, I'm sure it's just a matter of time before it comes to us, where I was, the district that I was in. And sure enough, the following year, we were experiencing some of the same things. So, and, talking to my librarian friends, we were all what are we doing? How much longer can we do this? When is the other shoe going to drop? It was just a time that was just really intense for us. And so it was then that I was well, I absolutely have to find a way to research this because this is what I was meant to research.
Well, and forgive me, if not you, who? If you're in the position to be able to commit to this cause, and because it is terribly upsetting for those of us spectators, sitting here comfortably from wherever we happen to be, and see our friends being absolutely traumatized by the attacks that are coming relentlessly, and undeservedly. It just, and you see this as an opportunity to reveal in publication something that is happening in the trenches.
Yeah. So kind of funny in a way. So I have a favorite school library researcher. Have you ever heard of Dr. Margaret Merga?
Oh, friend, she's been on the show.
Oh my gosh, I love her. I fangirl over her. So when I was, I've read all of her books because I think she's absolutely amazing and her research is fascinating. And I cannot tell you how many times I referenced her research in my dissertation. You can look at the article and there's tons of her work in my article. But I actually reached out to her when my first professor was like, no, you can't do this. And I reached out to her on, I don't know if it was X by then or if it was still Twitter or whatever, but I sent her a direct message and she actually got back to me and I was like, holy crap, this is the coolest day of my life. Because she kind of helped me see that, yeah, what I wanted to research was valid and it was real and it was important. So yeah, maybe someday I'll meet her.
Friends, I absolutely have met through our recordings, and Dr. Merga has been on my show twice. Episode 204 on literacy and wellness, which I believe is the book that you're referencing. And then episode 267 on creating a reading culture.
That was a great book.
And, I love doing these episodes. And Australia, they have this uniform nomenclature of teacher librarians. And I am so envious, because it is a situation which has complicated everyone's jobs here in the States, because we don't have a standardization of our titles or of the spaces we work in, to our detriment. Because what happens is, all of a sudden you get people who are ignorant, and they don't think that we are worthy of full-time employment or a budget. There's a whole lot of misinterpretation if we leave it up to chance that the person who holds the purse strings is going to appreciate to its fullest extent what we do and who we are as certified school librarians.
Someone once told me that, in admin school, like whatever, the admin degrees or whatever, that they don't even talk about school librarians. They don't talk about the school library. And I know it's 100% true. I'm married to a principal, and I know he got none of that when he was in grad school. However, he is very library supportive, because, what would his home life be if he wasn't, right? Because he's married to someone that was a school librarian.
Exactly. And I will say, I've discovered this is the case in more than a couple of states. But if you want to bring your administrator to the school librarian conference, the principal comes for free. And I do believe also, I know, because in the state of Michigan, if you are welcome to bring your principal, and if you bring your principal, there is no registration fee for the principals. Why? Because we want every reason. We want to fill that room with people who need to learn about what we do and the value that we can bring to a space if we have that supportive administration. And I know this is way off topic, friends, but I also know, because one of my friends whose space I observed came to AASL in Tampa with her principal, because her principal was receiving a recognition for supporting her award-winning program. This sort of collaboration, this sort of partnership between administrator and school librarian is one that so often is more antagonistic than anything, because we're always asking for money.
It's or something. If it's not money, it's something else.
Yes. Exactly. Friends, I didn't mean to get off topic. I will put those links to Dr. Merga's episodes. And what I really need to do is reach out and find out if she has some another opportunity for us to connect again, because it has been a hot minute. All right. So, Dr. Schattle, you are, I agree, we have been inspired by library leaders. Let me ask you, this article that you published, would we be able to link a version of it in our episode today?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. So, friends, there will be an article linked in the show notes. So, would you give us some context for, you've started to do that already, what compelled you to conduct the study that you did and share your findings with a larger audience to learn about what you did?
So, I really just wanted to look and see if librarians in a specific district, because that's my work was all focused in one district, if they were feeling, I guess, the pull of censorship. How was it affecting their everyday work? How was it affecting their home life even? And just, I wanted to see, honestly, I think in a way, I wanted my own feelings to be validated. I wanted to know, like, am I off base? Am I stressed every day when I go to work? Am I the only one feeling this way? And honestly, I found that I wasn't. I found that I was not special, at least in my area that I was living well, I say my area, meaning the greater Houston, Texas area, southeast Texas, that we were all all the librarians I talked to, we were feeling the same way.
Well, and there is this like pall that comes over a space when you are exposed to that kind of scrutiny. Unwelcome scrutiny. When you have this microscope, studying every single thing that you have on the shelves and looking to criticize every decision, because we don't do any of this casually. This wasn't something that we just kind of whipped together just on a lark. I mean, truly, when it comes to building our collections, it's a commitment that we've made, a professional commitment. And to have somebody with little to no actual professional training in collection development come at us with this expectation that we have some nefarious agenda.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, like when you hear the hateful things that people have said to others, maybe people in the legislature or people in just the general public have said or posted about school librarians, or stood at school board meetings or public library meetings and talked about the horrible atrocities that librarians are doing, how we're grooming children and such, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, because I would go to work every day. I want what's best for the children. I don't want to harm the children. I mean, I always took pride in the work I did. I take pride in the work I do now. So, and I have children of my own. So I send my children to school every day, and I want my children to feel welcome and at home and valued. Both of my children had some issues of their own. So one has some mental health concerns and the other one had some learning difficulties. And so I always wanted them to know that they were worthy, that they felt good, and that they were good people. And I think that's important, because some kids come to us and maybe we're the only positive person that they see, or the only positive face. And in the school library, you don't give any grades, you don't do any of that kind of stuff. So you're a safe place.
I know this past year, my administrators made a concerted effort. They sent a questionnaire out to our students during advisory and asked the students if and it was an open-ended question, is there an adult in the school who they feel they can go to with concerns or problems? Like, in effect, do you have a point of contact at school that you feel comfortable? And at the end of this exercise, in our, what we have, 1,257 kids, and I realize by Texas standards, that's just, a small, cute school. No, but, this was 1,250 some kids. And they came up with a list of at least 30 or 40 kids who did not voluntarily, did not say, yes, I have a person here at school that I feel I could go to. And we then took those cards with the kids' names on them. And we then looked, and amongst the 100 plus adults who work in that building, we all made sure that those names were grabbed up. We made that we reached out to those kids and made sure that they understood that even if we didn't have them as students that semester or that year, or, in the case of a librarian, or people who are like our social worker and our student service people, this is something that we take very personally. If we have students who feel that we are not supporting them, we are failing. And so no. And one of the most obvious ways that school librarians can outwardly extend that invitation to connect is through the collection we build. And then to have these people who just decide that we have somehow done this with our ulterior motives, it's just, it's beyond insulting. That's all.
I agree, because we know we've all heard the speech, read the article by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. I like to mix her name up. My maiden name is Bishop, so it really throws me for a loop. She talks about mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Windows, books being windows for children to see others and how they live and who they are. Then mirrors to see themselves reflected in the book. And then also sliding glass doors where sometimes you can actually open the door, step through, and live that experience. The first time I heard that, actually, she was a guest speaker at a conference that I was at. And yeah, I know, it was like, woo. This is embarrassing, but I had never heard of her before, and I was a seasoned librarian by this point. Let me just say that I was totally life changed, right? Because she put it in such easy to understand language, right? That's what I wanted my library to be for kids. That's what I want my own children to see in their school library.
No, so true. So true. Taking a look at what you saw in your community and the schools around you, that librarians were very clearly being personally attacked, that their spaces were being not just under scrutiny, but there were efforts to pull books from their collections. Tell us about Texas House Bill 900.
So this bill was introduced, and the whole idea was to basically create a unified selection policy for the entire state of Texas. Because how it was previously, I would say most schools, if not all school districts in Texas, had a selection policy, but most of them were just adopted from the Texas Association of School Boards, the policy that they recommended. So it was it's been a little comical to me that they had to create a statewide selection policy because basically we all had the same selection policy as it was anyway. But they created this statewide selection policy that they would have to go in and follow the policy for, all of their selections, what have you. But then what it also called for that was weird was it called for a rating identification system, kind of music. What was that back in the 90s when they had to start rating music and everything got the explicit label on
and
it?
Video games. Yes.
So this was supposed to be similar. There was going to be a rating system for books, but this rating system was all kinds of a problem because first of all, who's going to do the rating system? Well, they said that the publishers were going to have to create this rating system and rate all their books. Well, of course, the publishers got upset because they're like, we don't have that kind of manpower. We can't do that. So they, along with some different bookshops and vendors, actually filed a lawsuit, which then there was an injunction. And then they ended up striking down that part of the House Bill 900. So that part was never implemented, but it was funny to me because I was like, well, I guess the only way we're really going to see any change is because, money's involved.
I do like when the publishers and the booksellers are, we're all on the same, team librarian, you're not alone in this fight because when the business and industry start pushing back against the legislators, you have to feel validated that truly the legislators are absolutely deluded in how this all works. Did it surprise the librarians of Texas that the booksellers and that and the publishers would be on the side of the librarians? Because you would hope that's how it would work.
Right. I don't really think that we were necessarily surprised, at least, my little network of people that I was friends with and talked to frequently. I don't think we were surprised. Maybe there were people out there that were. I don't know.
The legislators were.
For sure.
All right. Yeah. So let's learn about this. I'll be honest, and I'll always admit it when I have to look something up. A phenomenological study. I had to practice that one. I was like, I got it. I did it on the first try. What is a phenomenological study?
So it is a qualitative type of research. So you can think of it this way. Your quantitative types of research, they're all about statistics and math, and I would love to say they're my thing, but they're not. So then you have qualitative, which is all about like interviews and talking to people. And really what it comes down to is when you're talking about a phenomenological study, you're talking about someone's lived experience. So how they have been affected by something. So that is the phenomenon. So for these school librarians that I had the privilege of speaking with, it was all about their lived experience of how book censorship had affected their job as a librarian and the roles that they performed in their everyday job.
I have to ask, so when you went about soliciting this type of feedback, understand it would probably take some time and some bandwidth. Did you have an idea of who you were going to reach out to? These were professionals you knew and you had worked with because at one point you were also a school librarian working in the trenches. But give me a sense of the number of people who you reached out to and were able to get this evidence assembled.
So when I first started out, my idea was to look at all across Texas. I wanted to use my affiliation with the Texas Library Association and the Texas Association of School Librarians and, like get a smattering of people from all over. And then I hit a roadblock where, once again, I was told, no, you can't do that. That's way too big of a project. And you would be working on this for several years if that is your goal. And I was like, well, okay, I hear you. Maybe I should like pull it back a little, right? Pull it back a little. So then I started thinking about like the Houston area, right? Because that's where I live. I'm in the Houston area. And so I started thinking about different school librarians that I knew that I could possibly reach out to as just like starting points. And so that's just kind of where I went with that, was just talking to people that I knew. And then I ended up focusing specifically on one district because in looking at the phenomenology, I wanted to know about their lived experience, but I also kind of wanted to set some parameters there. So there was a little bit of control. So they all were from the same district. They all had at least 3 years of experience. So they weren't brand new librarians, right? This wasn't something like they weren't in their first year floundering because they didn't really know the ropes yet or whatever. So, I wanted to kind of control that just a little bit.
So, and were they answering open-ended questions? Were they on a scale? How did when you collected the feedback?
So they were open-ended. I had an interview protocol that I had created, which, it started out with like some basic, like, getting comfortable questions, like, tell me a little about yourself. How long have you been a librarian? That kind of thing. And then it got into like the nitty-gritty, all the meat and potatoes, right? All the stuff that I really wanted to know. So I had like questions that I had written, but then I had also created some like follow-up questions, like maybe if they answer this, then I might want to ask this. Or maybe if they don't go into enough depth, then I want to ask this. So I had like a loosely formed outline, I guess, where I asked questions. And then, yeah, that was how I had that. They could answer for however long they wanted to on that specific question or however little amount of time.
And specifically, you were asking them about their collection development, but also their well-being and self-efficacy.
Yeah, because, you can look at all the literature and that they're tied together. Like if you feel like you're ineffective and you're not doing anything in your job, then your well-being is going to suffer. And if you feel really awful, you're, depressed because of whatever reason, right? Your work is going to suffer. Like they're related. They go hand in hand. Like, they they play off of each other in a sense. So I think that it was kind of really important to talk about those things, to look at those things, to, how is the job that you're doing now? How is how you're being treated affecting how you feel about the work that you do?
I would like to think that if a bunch of people who didn't know how to do my job came at me and criticized me for the job I did, I would be able to compartmentalize that, to be like, you know what? These are people who have no idea how to do my job. But the reality is we're human, right? And it still throws in that element of self-doubt, and it challenges how we regard ourselves as professionals, whether these jabs are, I don't want to say, legitimate or valid, but when somebody criticizes the work that you're doing, it really can't help but call into question our own confidence in what we do and how we feel about the work that we do every day. So would you give us an idea, how did this increase sort of attention and censorship of our collection? How did that impact the collection development process that these librarians were trying to continue throughout the school year as these attacks on their collections were happening?
So what I found, and you have to keep in mind, this was very much a small group of people. There were 11 librarians that I spoke with from one district. So you're talking about a very tiny population. But they all found that their collection development processes were taking far longer than they ever had before. So we all as librarians, we read reviews. That's what we do, because unfortunately, as much as we would love to, we cannot read every book. There's just way too many out there. But I was finding that lots of librarians that I talked to were saying that they couldn't really rely on reviews anymore because, they didn't know. Were they going, they read a review, but are they going to get something that is questionable? And then so they might read a review and they might get something, but then they might still find that they needed to read it before it could go on the shelf. Or maybe they were going to public libraries and trying to find books so they could read them before they bought them. But then, they're still they're just finding that it's taking so much time that they don't have, right? And collection development, it's a lengthy process anyway. Right? I mean, well, maybe not. If you don't have much money to spend, it doesn't take much time. But if you have a decent budget, I don't know a single school librarian anywhere that's been like, well, I had all this money to spend, so I was just buying whatever. I mean, nobody does that.
I was going to say, back in the ESSER days, when we had ESSER funds after the pandemic, there was something that I was aware was never going to happen again in my career, but it involved a very small window of time and spending an amount of money that I could barely believe this was actually happening. It was like winning the lotto or something. But but I think that especially when you talk to people for whom they are not rookie librarians, these are not rookie librarians. You're dealing with people who are, in some cases, seasoned. They are veterans. This is not their first rodeo. They have built a collection repeatedly, and you'd like to think that at some point you get better at this, and you start to trust your judgment as a professional. And the longer you do this, the hope is that you become more confident in the decisions that you're making and you're not second guessing yourself. But when somebody calls into question what you're doing, all of a sudden that hyper scrutiny that is imposed on the collection that we're building, this becomes an absolute colossal expense of time that we have to use just to satisfy community members who have made it their life's mission to upend whatever sense of normalcy we have in our spaces.
Yeah, it's just, it's just crazy to me. I don't know. We have these degrees and, we want to do our job, but sometimes it's hard. Just finding the time to do all the reading of, all the books, because now you have to read all the books.
So I regularly hear from school librarians that there aren't enough hours in the day to do our jobs. We arrive before school early, we work through lunch, we stay late. I'm already aware that there are a number of us who have extended calendars where we have built-in days where we are working either before the school year starts or well until after the school year ends. Our professional training, our judgment apparently isn't good enough when it comes to selecting the books that we oversee. And it's not just insulting the burden that we now have to satisfy somebody's expectations of how we are and are supposed to be doing our jobs.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes it harder because, like you said, we have training for this. We go to school to learn how to develop collections. And, I'm sure you did, as I did, took classes on collection development, but not just that. I took children's literature. I took young adult literature. I mean, I enjoyed them. Honestly, I was exposed to books I probably would have never picked up on my own. And I know, like, even now, looking back at those classes, I can still, recall some of those books that I read in those classes back in 2007. I can say, I know that I've put specific books that I read because of those classes in specific children's hands because that was what they needed at that moment. I've always said that my most favorite part of my job as a school librarian was connecting kids with that just right book for them, with that book that they didn't know they needed, but they needed.
At Wayne State University, we had to pick two of the three categories. So there was a young adult course, a middle grade course, and a children's literature. And these were actually the three classes that overlapped with our School of Education. And so that was really interesting. And I'll never forget, it was the assignment was legend. It was the 100-book project. And the 100-book project, the expectation is that we would familiarize ourselves with 100 books during the semester and write up synopsises and all sorts of write-ups and critical reviews. And we thought it absolutely daunting at the time, but now that I think about it, it was some of the most memorable activities I did, and I really, really enjoyed it. Another key finding of your study is that advocacy has become an even more vital aspect of our daily work. And again, for those of us who work in relative peace and harmony with our school community writ large, this shouldn't be something that we have to address on a regular basis. But for your community of study subjects, this was, again, a burden because it was a whole new layer of work that they had to do to make sure that they were able to retain as much of their collection as they could.
So I think that as school librarians, from the time that I started as a school librarian in 2007. I think that I've constantly over and over and over heard about how you've got to have your elevator speech ready. You've got to be ready to tell anyone at any time about what you do and how great the library is and all that stuff. And it is. But I don't think I ever really understood like why that was so important until I really started researching and looking at it, because really it is super important because like we've already kind of talked about, administrators don't take a class that involves school librarians. They don't learn about school librarians, they don't learn about the school library, and chances are likely that whatever the library was when they were a student is not what it is now. So it's really important for school librarians to be able to talk to their administrators and their community, because the community on the whole, all stakeholders, parents, teachers, administrators, even the students, right? Everybody needs to buy into what you're doing because, what you're doing is important. And, I think a lot of times, like maybe some of those stakeholders see what you're doing, but maybe not all of them see. So getting them all to see that is really important. And that advocacy piece is just taking so much time. And I think, as I can think back to my schooling, right? I didn't take any courses in library school about advocacy. I didn't. So, like, that's something I think that maybe needs to change some. Like, maybe they need to have courses about how to advocate, because I think for some people that comes natural, but others it doesn't.
I do remember advocacy was something that was part of, I was maybe our programming class. I'm not sure, but it was definitely a class that was taught by one of my favorite instructors because they were in the trenches. So by day, they were working in the school library. And then at, 4:30 or 4:45 in the afternoon, we were at Wayne State taking these classes in person because Zoom was not a thing when I went to library school. And I absolutely took everything they said and internalized it because they were school librarians who were now teaching the next batch of people who wanted to become school librarians. And I was like, I'm listening to somebody who does this every day. It was just so very real. It should surprise no one that in a climate where our profession is being scrutinized at this level, that your study also revealed this increase in self-censorship becoming more prevalent, referred to as the chilling effect in your study. Why invite the attacks if we can prevent them from even happening if we just don't buy the books in the first place?
So I think this is something that lots and lots of librarians struggle with. As a school librarian, if I'm being completely transparent, it's something that I struggled with because, I didn't want to bring negative attention to myself. I had to have a job, right? Like, I needed a job. My family depended on me having a job. I think that's something that lots of people struggle with, just being able to balance that, right? Stay true to the whole, representing everybody and the intellectual freedom um, principles while still, you know, making everybody happy. It's a hard thing to do. Really, I think you can't always do both, right?
In 2018, and my season 1 of being a podcaster, episode 17, and this, yes, episode 17 of season 1. And friends, I will never recommend you go back to season 1, but I recorded episode 17, which was a solo effort. Self-censorship is real. And that was the episode. And it was me admitting some of the ugly truths of what I had done in the name of avoiding that sort of scrutiny by my administration and anyone who might decide that having me there was a bad idea. And it was about self-preservation. Self-censorship is about self-preservation. There, I said it.
And you're 100% right. I don't know. It's something I think definitely as a school librarian, I struggled with it a lot.
And again, this is all in the interest of, you're studying how this has impacted those of us in the trenches, right? And I use a battle analogy because we just, at some point, you feel attacked. And you feel like you're always on the defense, trying to make sure that you still have a job to come back to the next day. You also indicated the results that you were going through with your study subjects, an elevated anxiety experienced. And, I'm going to say that there were numerous longstanding reasons why a school librarian's anxiety might be heightened, which sort of actually predate this push for censorship. And I'll be honest, regardless of the censorship issues, we were always on the edge because out of fear of losing our jobs, out of fear of being cut. My instructors were very candid when I was in library school, and this would have been, my gosh, I was in library school. I started when the Twin Towers fell in 2001. And I took a 15-month hiatus because I gave birth to twins. And then I finished my degree when the twins were going to kindergarten in 2007. I think I finished in 5.5 years. I was very proud. But I remember coming home and realizing, listening to these instructors saying, I do not get to take anything for granted. I don't get to take my job for granted. And it's something I've had to explain to educators who teach math. I'm like, nobody is cutting math this year.
That is true. When I first introduced myself, I told you that, or I told all the listeners, everyone, that I actually spent 11 years in the high school library and then was budget cut down to elementary. So I was fortunate enough to be in a school with 2 librarians, which, it was a big school. It had about 4,000 students. So it's a big school, right? And really fortunate. 2 librarians. That was amazing. There was always someone to bounce off ideas. She was really, really good at the ideas, and I was really, really good at the implementation. So we worked well together, and our students really felt supported, and the teachers loved coming to the library. It was great. But then when they decided that they needed to free up some more funds for, I don't know, whatever, it was definitely a rough time for budgeting. They decided that each high school would only have 1 librarian. So I was the last one in, so I was the first one out, which they promised me a job, which was great. But for me, that job was down at elementary, which was definitely, it was hard. It was a hard adjustment for me. I'm really glad that I did it. Those 2 years were amazing. And I learned so much. I really did. I learned a lot about kids. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I thought I was. But it was just, it was a hard time. So I feel like constantly worrying about if I'm going to have a job. And if you want to look at the literature on that, those jobs, the school librarian jobs across the country are just dwindling. They're just not as prevalent as they used to be.
What did surprise me is that something that was revealed when your respondents were answering is that they found that during this time when they were under attack for the collection that they had built and from the community and from families, but what your study subjects revealed is that they were positively supported by their district and their building administrators. And I'm just I'm trying to think, I was like, well, now, wait a minute. If they're being attacked by the community and their administrators actually are being very supportive, but I have to wonder if some of that has something to do with the fact that across the board, we are experiencing teacher shortages across the United States. And I'm just wondering if our administrators are using this opportunity to support all the professionals in their building, because replacing them or having them be reassigned and losing staff members would absolutely deplete their own staff. It would result in a loss of professionals in their building, or at the very least, now having to fill vacancies would also be time consuming.
Right. I'm curious about that. When I did the study, that was back in 2023, things looked maybe a little different. I don't think we didn't have quite the teacher shortage then, at least here in Texas and in this like Southeast Texas area. We didn't have quite the issues that we have now as far as staffing goes. But yeah, that's interesting. I would honestly really like to redo this. I say redo, it's not really redo, but like replicate. I would like to replicate this study just at a larger level, like I would like to look at other areas in Texas or even across the country to see if these results that I received are, kind of indicative, or if it's just these are like way off. Because honestly, I'm not sure that everyone would say they feel supported like these specific librarians do. I wonder if they're actually just an anomaly.
I also appreciate that when you're going through a rough patch, you're trying to find, look at the bright side. Hey, look at the bright side. And what is fair to say is I have never felt anything but support from my teachers and my administration when it came to my collection development. My teachers and my administrators have been very much on board with the decisions I've made and the collection I have built. My banned book display, meaning the books we have in our collection that other people find objectionable, are on full display for every candidate who's gotten hired, and every administrator who's ever worked for us has had to walk by from the first day of school to the last day of school. And, we have parents come in for back to school night and, open house, and our incoming rising eighth graders come and they're like, what are all these books? I'm like, oh, well, those are books you can read anytime you want. Are you banning them? No, but somebody else did. I love the fact that we can have those conversations, and I've felt a lot of support. But, I really think that when it comes to the community, oftentimes what they're expressing are not the sentiments of educators and the professionals and the administrators who oversee our schools. There are individuals with personal opinions about what kids should read.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. I mean, yeah, and that's something I think as a parent I struggle with, right? Because I'm all for people being involved with their children and knowing what they're doing, but at the same time, I'm not really okay with other people telling me what my kids can read, right? Because I as a parent put a lot of time into my kids. I'm not a perfect parent. I'm really not. I have a lot of shortcomings. But my kids know that, and full disclosure here too. My kids are not big readers. I wish they were. I have 2 daughters. Neither one of them is like avid reader like me. You'll always catch me with a book, right? But I will say this, they know like a couple years ago, my teenage daughter, she was probably maybe like a freshman at the time. She told me she wanted to read a specific book. I had read that book and I was like, "Ooh, I don't think she's going to like that one." Like it was one that had some like, had some kind of explicit scenes in it, and I was like, it was a little steamy. It was a little steamy. And I know my daughter, right? I know her very well. So I was like, "Okay, well, you can read whatever you want to. You know that. But I want you to know that it's got this, this, this in it. It's going to probably make you uncomfortable. So when you have questions, I want you to come and ask me." And she was like, after I told her, like what she could expect in the book, she was like, "Yeah, no, I don't think that one's for me." So we've put in that time to know, number one, what our kids can handle. And then 2, to trust them to make good decisions for themselves and to let them know that come talk to me. Don't talk to your friends about that kind of stuff. Talk to me.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Schattle, what is it that you would like listeners and readers to take away from the study that you published?
I really want everybody to see that librarians, we're valuable. We have a job that we do well, and we function at our best when people communicate with us and allow us to be stakeholders ourselves, trust us to do our job, but also allow us, they work with us. So we're not just feeling like we're out there drifting in the sea by ourselves, right? I want librarians to feel like they are valued and they are valuable and they are important.
Listen, I know there's somebody out there who might want to reach out to you and just pick your brain, because this is your area of expertise. Is there an email or a best way that our listeners can get in touch with you? They're also welcome to reach out to me, and I can forward their inquiries. But is there a way that they can get in touch with you?
Sure. You can reach me by email at schattleandoconnor.pdf.
Excellent. And friends, we'll make sure to put a link in the show notes. Dr. Schattle, I am so grateful. This conversation is an important one, and I'm so grateful that you've allowed our listeners to tune in because, for those of us around the country, it is important to have the perspective and appreciate what happens when community members overextend their inquiring minds into exactly what it is that we do professionally every day to provide the collection that we feel supports the community of readers that we have in our building and we're hoping to grow. But I'm so grateful that you were generous and shared your study with us. And I know that it has given a lot of listeners an opportunity to sort of think about their own library collections that we have and perhaps see and appreciate our circumstances for what they are.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you, and I hope our paths cross again in the future.
Me too. Me too. Thanks again for having me on the podcast.
Thank you so much. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Are you curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast? Then simply click on the link, which can be found in our show notes. Search title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make 2026 your time to shine. If you know of a school librarian residing in one of the 12 states which have yet to be featured on an episode, notably Arizona, Delaware, Hawaii, Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, South Dakota, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming, please share out my email, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Thank you so much for helping me reach and be able to showcase the school librarians in all 50 states. Speaking of which, the topic of our next episode is 50 States, North Dakota Debuts, and my conversation with Mackenzie Dietz. I hope you will tune in.